Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and dear audience. On behalf of the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I'm honored to welcome you to the webinar titled From Crisis to Opportunity Realizing Peace Dividends for the Peoples of Myanmar. This webinar, the 16th episode in our series under Global Affairs Canada's Charting a Lasting Peace for Myanmar project, will examine Myanmar's economic conditions in times of conflict and peace. In particular, we will compare the country's pre coup d'etat and post coup economic situations with a spotlight on the state of Rakhine, also known as Arakan. Our aim is to understand how conflict has shaped Myanmar's economic trajectory and to explore the potential peace dividends, the tangible benefits that peace could bring to Myanmar's people. Over the past decade, Myanmar's story has been one of dramatic swings. From 2011 up to 2020, the country experienced encouraging reforms and robust growth, averaging around 6 to 7% of gross domestic product growth per year, as reported by World Bank. The audience, before we proceed, let's do the treaty recognition. The institute is based on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, and Dakota and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Metis Nation. We all are treaty people, and we all are promise bound to work together in the true spirit of truth and reconciliation. The audience, as I was saying, the Myanmar story is of a huge swing from one of economic growth to the in the post coup period of 2020, one of the stagnancy. But before I actually talk about Myanmar, it is interesting to share with you about the 2025 Global Peace Index just released by Institute of Peace and Economics from Australia. And I will only touch upon very briefly two paragraphs from the report, and feel free to check yourself out. It's a very comprehensive report, one in a kind in the world, which documents and analyzes the state of peace in the world. So here are the first two paragraphs, and I quote: "The 2025 Global Peace Index finds that global peacefulness continues to decline, and that many of the leading factors that precede major conflicts are higher than they have been since the end of World War II. More countries are increasing their levels of militarization against the backdrop of rising geopolitical tensions, increasing conflict, the breakup of traditional alliances, and rising economic uncertainty. There are currently 59 active state based conflicts as of writing this report, and the most since the end of World War II, and three more than the prior year. Last year, 17 countries recorded over 1,000 conflict related deaths. Additionally, the successful resolution of conflicts is lower than at any point in the last 50 years. Conflicts that ended in a decisive victory fell from 49% in the 1970s to 9% in the 2010s, while conflicts that ended through peace agreements fell from 23% to 4% over the same period. It is, I think, quite a gloomy picture with regards to the peacefulness of the world. Now, coming back to our study area, the Myanmar, as I was referring to, that during this period, 21 and 2020, there was a little bit of increase and growth in economic state of Myanmar, but again, it fell rapidly after the coup. So this period saw millions of people lifted out of poverty and a surge of optimism supported by new investments and greater stability. Rakhine State, however, remained an outlier in this growth story, though. Even before the 2021 military coup, Rakhine was one of the poorest regions in Myanmar, beset with chronic underdevelopment and intercommunal tensions. In fact, the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State reported that Rakhine's poverty rate was about 78%, nearly double the national average of 37.5. Most people in Rakhine rely on farming, fishing, and small trades, and landlessness is widespread, affecting 60% of households in the north. Years of unrest and humanitarian crisis, including the devastating 2017 violence, which drove over 750,000 Rohingyas from their homes, have only deepened Rakhine's woes. The state's development has fallen further behind the rest of Myanmar as conflict and instability have scared away investment and undermined opportunities. This illustrates a painful truth. Conflict carries an immense economic cost at both local and national level. Now, just to talk about post coup economic challenges in Myanmar, the February 2021 military coup plunged Myanmar into crisis, erasing many hard earned gains of the previous decade. The coup, combined with the COVID-19 pandemic, caused a sharp economic contraction. The World Bank estimated Myanmar's economy shrank by over 10% in 2021, and the United Nations Development Program warned that poverty could double in a very short time, and which was reported in East Asia Forum website. Indeed, recent analysis suggests that nearly half of Myanmar's population may now be living in poverty, a startling reversal from the trends before the coup. Basic services have deteriorated, inflation has soared, and the kyat, the currency, has depreciated, all amid a climate of uncertainty and conflict. What was once one of Southeast Asia's faster growing economies has become its weakest performing, with minimal growth around 1% expected in 2024 and beyond under current conditions, as reported by World Bank. The humanitarian situation is dire. As of this year, roughly one third of Myanmar's people, over 18 million in number, require humanitarian assistance, which includes 6 million children. These grim indicators underscore how profoundly renewed conflict, political instability, and violence have damaged Myanmar's economic and social fabric. The audience, Myanmar's situation reflects a broader principle that scholars and economists have observed worldwide, as also reported by Global Peace Index today. War and instability impose enormous economic costs, whereas peace creates opportunities for prosperity. To put this in perspective, research by the Institute for Economics and Peace, led by Steve Kilelia, finds that violent conflict and insecurity cost the world over $14 trillion per year, roughly equivalent to 10 to 12% of global GDP. This staggering figure, about 5%, $5 per person per day, represent resources spent on militaries, conflict containment, destruction, and lost productivity rather than on positive investment in society. By contrast, even small improvements in peace can yield outsized benefits. According to the Institute's analysis, countries that became more peaceful since 2000 enjoyed on average 1.4% higher GDP per capita growth each year compared to countries that became less peaceful, resulting in a 30% larger GDP per capita over 2 decades. This is the essence of peace dividend, the economic boost that comes when a society shifts spending and effort away from conflict and toward development and resilience. In practical terms, reducing violence frees up vast funds that can be redirected to build schools and clinics, improve infrastructure, create jobs, and spur innovation. For example, it is estimated that a mere 2% reduction in global conflict would release funds equal to the entire world development aid budget, money that could be used to uplift vulnerable communities instead of fighting wars. These global insights strongly resonate in Myanmar's context. Decades of civil strife, ethnic conflicts, and the recent coup have not only caused untold human suffering, but also constrained Myanmar's economic potential. If peace and stability can be restored, Myanmar could unlock its own peace dividend. The audience. Resources currently absorbed by war, from excessive military spending to the lost productivity of conflict affected regions, could be rechanneled into productive investment across all states and regions. A peaceful environment would rebuild investor confidence, encourage tourism and trade, and allow Myanmar's talented people to focus on education, entrepreneurship, and community development rather than mere survival. In Rakhine State, especially, peace would mean lifting movement restrictions, reopening markets, and investing in infrastructure, all of which are essential to reduce the extreme poverty, which we mentioned around 78% reported in 2017, that has gripped the region. The promise of a lasting peace in Myanmar is not abstract. It translates into better livelihoods, lower inflation, more jobs and opportunities, as well as improved health and education for millions of people who have thus far only known recurring crisis. The audience of this institute and whoever is listening today, this webinar is a step toward transforming crisis into opportunity. By examining hard data and drawing lessons from both Myanmar's experience and global research, we seek to generate knowledge that can inform policy and action in the pursuit of peace. This event is part of phase one of our project, devoted to understanding the challenges and laying the groundwork for solutions. In this academic forum, let us critically analyze how economic policy, peace building, and inclusive development intersect. I encourage everyone to actively participate, ask questions, share insights, and consider innovative approaches. The knowledge we cultivate here will feed into practical strategies for Myanmar's future. Our call to action is clear. We must use evidence and dialogue to illuminate a path out of conflict, one that delivers real dividends for the people on the ground. In doing so, we uphold the hope that Myanmar's darkest days can give way to a new dawn of peace and prosperity. So we are now going to introduce our esteemed speaker, who is also our one of the core members of the project. And to help us delve deeper into these issues, we have invited Mr. Felix Haas, our keynote expert today. Felix has over 10 years of experience in development policy, peace building, and humanitarian issues in Southeast Asia. He has been based in Myanmar as an independent consultant since 2013, as an industrial engineer by academic training, a Rotary Peace Fellow, a long-term resident in Myanmar on the side of inside, and with a business mindset, he is able to share with us unique insights into the unfolding Myanmar poly crisis. Felix has been involved in projects in Myanmar and the region, mostly at the interface of the public, development, private sector, seeking to catalyze practical economic development initiatives such as livelihood improvements, market linkages, and economic governance. Following the political crisis in Myanmar after 2021, Felix has coordinated humanitarian projects and has been involved in resilience programming at the nexus of development, peace building, and humanitarian assistance. And with this, let's begin the discussion. But also, I would like to draw attention that we have Bonnie Emerson, one of the Rotary Peace Fellows. She kindly joined today to participate in the discussion. And we also have, as in most of the cases, our founder advisor, David Newman, and Dr. Ernest Thiessen. And we all will engage in the Q&A session once Felix presents. Felix, floor is yours. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, a good morning from Myanmar to all the colleagues and listeners of this webinar. First of all, I'm very pleased to join you this morning, and I think Causa has provided really a fascinating overview and framing of the discussion. So we might overlap in some observations and can dive deeper into this very complex issue, of course, in the question and answer session, then much more into different sectors, different areas of interest, etc. Let me start. I've prepared a brief presentation, which should be displaying. Yeah, good. The idea of this talk is to do work that typically a medical doctor would do. We are trying to create a diagnosis of the situation as it stands and try to find ways how, in particular, the private sector, how economic development can really cure this crisis, what the opportunity is, how in the past the private sector has engaged, and these sorts of perspectives. The word of peace dividends is often a term used in an academic context only. However, it is, from my perspective, from a perspective of someone engaged with the private sector, working with the private sector, for the private sector, running a company myself, it is something very, very tangible. In fact, it's a return on investment. It's a commitment to the country by an enterprise. It's a creation of jobs, etc. So all this entails peace dividends. So in terms of the framing, I mentioned, we would talk about two aspects. We would talk about the crisis, but about the opportunity in particular that arises from this crisis, after the crisis, or that may have averted the crisis or the crises, so to say. Let me start in this context. In this context, let me start with an unconventional perspective on Myanmar at this stage, with the opportunity, because one of the key features of peace dividends and of engagement in any emerging market is the expectation, in fact. And Causa has mentioned this aspect very clearly. The prospect of a long-term investment into the people of Myanmar, into a private sector enterprise, all depends on the expectation of what this business would look like 20 years down the line. And from this perspective, it is very critical to see this aspect of expectation and opportunity in the context of Myanmar. I want to give a brief example, perhaps to frame this, why I'm starting with the opportunity, because it's been this opportunity that has also driven me personally to come to Myanmar. Back in 2013, as a brief anecdote, there had been a publication by McKinsey called Myanmar's Unique Moment, which projected Myanmar's economy to quadruple until 2030. Now we are 5 years ahead of 2030, and I'm not sure if this is going to really take shape. However, what I would like to say is that a report like this, a forward-looking perspective, a vision, can do a lot in shaping people to come into the country, people to contribute ideas, people to commit time and resources. And that is why we start with the opportunity. So for this perspective, of course, given the focus of CRRIC on both the situation in Bangladesh and the Rohingya crisis linked to the Myanmar crisis, of course, Rakhine State is an area of particular interest. And so what I'm showing here and what I'm projecting here in this slide is information that was prepared by Myanmar Survey Research back in 2019 in the context of the Rakhine State Investment Forum. There was an investment forum still held before the COVID-19 time and still held under the NLD government at Ngapali Beach. I mean, you might see the one photo in the middle here of the location of this investment forum. So what you can see on this slide are some of the opportunities that this state has, and I would like to present just a few thoughts about just this case study of Rakhine State and why really, there would be, if the political situation were settled, there would be plentiful of opportunity and resources to build on. First of all, you see the location of Rakhine State. Rakhine State is a coastal state. Anyone who has been in Myanmar knows about infrastructure limitations in the country in terms of road infrastructure, rudimentary railway transportation, etc. We have here a state that has a long coastline, longer than the coastlines of many states in the region. That comes with economic opportunities, looking at fisheries, etc. But it comes with an immediate opportunity in terms of transport. Coastal shipping could fix any of the transport challenges of Rakhine State. You need jetties, you don't need roads, you don't need railways, and the state could be interconnected. The same applies to the transport of people. There are many options how riverine and coastline transport could really address most of could really interconnect the state beyond road infrastructure. So that is already, I mean, a huge win. We can look, we always look when, I think, I mean, we will do a correlation, maybe AI can do that as well. When we would do a correlation of the Myanmar-Bangladesh relationship, we will find the Rohingya crisis, we will find areas, I mean, once the recalling of the Bangladesh ambassador recently. So we find just information on crisis and on anything negative. But if you just look at it, I mean, we have in Myanmar, vast unpopulated land, vast arable land, vast land that can be used for agricultural production, rice, for cash crops, for many different crops. And we have in Bangladesh a country scarce in land resources with a vast population. I mean, if you just combine this, I mean, you see the opportunity. However, we have at this stage, I mean, just rudimentary, I mean, not even paved roads that connect the two countries. We don't have any railway. We don't have Myanmar and Bangladesh on any agenda to, in fact, infrastructurally interconnect. So, I mean, that is basically the sort of challenge. So, I mean, there's just from a demand and supply perspective, I mean, we would have a huge potential if we just zoom into these two markets, if these two markets just would interconnect. And there's a lot of resources that also Bangladesh obviously can provide. I mean, might it be, I mean, the largest export sector of Bangladesh to Myanmar is at the moment the pharmaceutical sector, but there could be many other ways. And again, coastal shipping would even fix this issue of limited infrastructure connectivity, the political challenges, the operations of ethnic armed groups, and the population of displaced people in Bangladesh from the Rohingya exodus. So that already frames a great opportunity, but the opportunity doesn't really end here. I mean, you can see, for instance, the touristic sites that are of interest, which are Mrauk, the old Rakhine capital, Ngapali Beach, I mean, a well-developed city with an airport, with pristine beaches, etc., not overcrowded and all, which would have had the crisis set aside a vast opportunity. And we also have, which might differentiate Rakhine State from many other states, also vast opportunities for investment and expansion in the industrial sector. We have Chinese engagement and investment in the Chaukpu Special Economic Zone. We have on Manaung Island also oil and gas investments basically by China. We have the starting point of the pipeline to Kunming in that case. So all these are important prerequisites. So, I mean, you have access to energy resources, and you could have really, in terms of electrification, you could make vast progress, in fact, in this regard. And perhaps, I mean, we can look at this opportunity from this lens. Imagine economic policies would have really stimulated this sort of growth. Imagine such industry would have been built up. Where would the Rohingya population basically find its space? I mean, what sort of employment could be created that is really inclusive and that provides opportunities for youth from a Rakhine background, from a Rohingya background, and from a Burma background, for instance. So if you just see this opportunity, there would be many dots to be connected. And I believe this 2019 investment fair, although it was after the Rohingya crisis, or the let's say the hottest point of this issue that is near and dear to all of us, we had a hopeful environment in this sense. So we can see a brief list that actually the participants in this Rakhine State Investment Fair had basically identified as key sectors. I mean, you just see that basically developed. So this doesn't come from me as a suggestion. This comes really from business people in Rakhine who had been hoping for more favorable times. So with that, I will come to the next bit, which is the challenge. That is, I mean, you can see two illustrations here. One is uh, from an NGO that in fact is doing a conflict mapping, and you see the different types of incidents that have occurred in Rakhine State until September 2024 in that case. You can see along any major road infrastructure in the entity of the state, in fact, we had conflict incidents, we had aerial bombardments, we had all sorts of issues that you could imagine. At this stage, Chaokpyu and Sitwe remain as somewhat, you know, cities under siege, where American army has not yet expanded. In fact, but when these areas are surrounded, so it's basically a grim picture with a lot of conflict. This conflict intensified, in fact, with the Operation 1027 back in 2023. When an alliance of ethnic armed groups, predominantly located along the China-Myanmar border, but also including American army, had launched a comprehensive and coordinated and unprecedented offensive against the Tamadong. And since then, we have really this escalation of violence and this really fierce fighting that we have. That obviously is an obstacle when we look at this. You know, we have fighting there on all sorts of domains, of course. But I would like to also go a little bit back to a sort of tension that we had before, which often is overlooked, which relates to actually the political ambitions of the Arakanese. Because there have been a lot of tensions that have been overlooked under the NLD term. So Rakhine State, in terms of the political landscape, had a very strong public support for a Rakhine ethnic political party. So this party basically won in the majority of townships of Rakhine State the 2015 election in both houses, effectively, Myote Loto and Pitu Loto. But the chief minister of Rakhine State was, even under the NLD government, fielded by NLD. So it would have been the only state that, just by the logic of the popular vote, that should have been fielded with a Rakhine ethnic. But I mean, there had been this sort of tension that NLD put in place an NLD appointed official, in fact. So we have this sort of tension, and that explains also why the Arakanese had always been interested in, even, I mean, in the statement that you can see here by the ethnic armed group, in fact, or the political wing of the Arakan army, in which the armed group announced they had a keen interest to have, in all parts of the township where the 2020 election was cancelled, to have, in fact, a by-election taking place, because they had tremendous hope, in fact, of political participation to this formal channel. So that is a very interesting sort of component that that oftentimes is overlooked. But we have not just a tension between the Tamador and the Rohingya group, but we have also a tension between the Arakanese and the Burma. And now, obviously, the direct confrontation in military terms between the Burma-dominated Tamador and the Arakan army. So, I mean, there's basically both the opportunity and the tension in very brief. Then I would like to just, on the next slide, go a bit into the macro picture of Myanmar's economy. And I'm doing that just in terms of a few glimpses, which I believe are very important to understand really where we are standing, and what really, based on that, the potential really for peaceful development, for peace dividends would be. You know, I would like to start with perhaps the most kind of, you know, dominant issues in discussion, and then we can zoom into different areas. You all are aware of the earthquake that hit Myanmar in recent months. I believe it was end of April of this year, which really devastated the entire city of uh, Mandalay, but also Naypyidaw. Even the political capital had been severely damaged, as well as parts of Rakhine State, parts of Sagaing region, etc. The World Bank estimates that this destruction of assets, basically, and of course of human life and livelihoods, has or will contribute to, in fact, 4 percentage points in decline of the projected GDP. And it is estimated that 14% of the entire assets in this region have in fact, well, I mean, the assets of an amount of 14% of the GDP have been destroyed in this earthquake within literally seconds, and within the aftermath of it. So there's a lot that a lot of baggage that any economic vision of Myanmar starts from, and we cannot just see these as destroyed houses. These, I mean, there is no pension system in Myanmar, so families would buy property, would own an apartment, and that is basically the way how you secure your future. You see the images, and you see where people are standing. It is really a dire situation. Then to stick to the chronic issues, I mean, the electricity shortage and power shortage. I mean, it has become after the earthquake, but also before. It has become a dire situation with up to 12 hours of power cuts during the day. So everyone is reliant on generators, etc. So these sort of things are, I mean, especially the power sector, it's a sector that so chronically is underdeveloped, is preventing industrial growth, and is an issue that on an economically feasible basis, on an economically profitable basis, could be solved by investments into power infrastructure, with the certain issues, remaining in this whole sense. But that is one of the most kind of pressing issues. It's basically the engine basically missing, or the engine out of fuel, that could really drive Myanmar's economy and Myanmar's peace dividends. Then I would like to speak a bit about the socioeconomic situation of the people and the overall state of the economy. Again, I mentioned expectations, and one of the sectors that also is very much affected by expectations and by perceived risks is the tourism sector. And you can see on the right lower part of the slide the tourist arrivals, and you see that all the economies here in the region have really, based on these World Bank estimates and this data compilation, all the economies in the ASEAN region have in fact managed to recover to pre-COVID levels, more or less, within the last couple of years. And Myanmar stands at a tourist arrival rate of about 20% of the level that it had before the most recent crisis and before COVID-19. So that is a significant factor, of course, when we look at any business operating in the tourism sector. Then also two interrelated graphs that are the two curves that you can see here, I think are very important to understand. One is the Myanmar Kyat to US dollar exchange rate. What we can see here is that the Myanmar Kyat really started off back in 2021 at the level of 1,300 Myanmar Kyat to the dollar, and it has now reached a level of around 4,600 Myanmar Kyat to the dollar. So what has happened is that the Myanmar Kyat, and this happened in fact within a very short period of time, has devalued significantly and unexpectedly as well. And we had certain moments basically when within one day, really, there had been a very significant movement of the exchange rate. So now Myanmar is in a different from Canada, different from other countries in the region, has very little resilience to deal with foreign exchange rate shocks. In fact, the economy is import dependent. So what that means is any of your products that you are purchasing, any of your inputs which are not industrially produced in Myanmar, which is anything from agricultural machinery to milk to even, in most parts, cooking oil. If you look at all these basic goods of daily life, with a sudden fluctuation in the exchange rate and a depreciation of the Myanmar Chat, all the products of daily life got more expensive by exactly the factor that the exchange rate changed. And that is something that we have seen. We didn't see it immediately because there's a certain transition within the economy when prices adjust, but we can see that prices have, in fact, at this moment adjusted, and that and wages have not in the same way. So we have greater poverty. We have really stepping back. You might have nominally more cash in the bank, cash in hand, but it's worth less. So it's really, what you would see in the case of Senior Rush and all, and it's a very dominant example because also the exchange rate even relates to the conflict economy. So, just to illustrate what that concretely means, you see one index actually at the top. It's the so-called Chicken Curry Index, which is developed by a consulting firm in Myanmar called All Myanmar Advisors, and it's a fascinating and simple tool to, in fact, understand the price developments. Anyone might know the Big Mac Index, which compares the price level in different economies globally. This Chicken Curry Index is the Myanmar version of it, because these are the ingredients that people would need to purchase for a typical traditional Myanmar dish, which happens to be chicken curry. So what this index is trying to do is to look at the basic ingredients, from onions to tomatoes to chicken, in fact, and cooking oil, salt, whatever it is, and to analyze really price developments as an inflation index, in fact. So this level in September 2021, the index was set to 100. So all the values that you can see here are in fact in relation to the September 2021 value. And you see, at the moment, we might be at a level of 300 approximately. So prices having tripled, in fact, for chicken curry, and wages have not really increased. So, in that sense. So, for instance, most dominant, you might see the development basically before January 2025, basically between, if you look at, for instance, January 2024 to the period until January 2025, there we really had a year-on-year increase in the price level, according to the Chicken Curry Index, of 103.7%. So really a doubling of any prices. And at that time, it was found that for feeding a family of 4 to 5 for one day, you needed to earn as a family 3.78 times the minimum wage. So meaning you would need to have 4 people in a family of 4 working in order at the minimum wage in order to feed, in order to eat, and in order to sustain your life. So all these developments show how significant really in this import-dependent economy, Myanmar, the changes in price have really been. But also we want to look, of course, at the intersection between peace and the economy, but also conflict and the economy. And in fact, when you take a look at the Myanmar Chat per US dollar chart at the bottom again, you will see that it might look different from a Canadian dollar to US dollar chart in that sense. The economics between the US and Canada, are turbulent, but what you see in the chart, might still exceed what you typically would expect in terms of interesting observations, so to say. So you can see that there are different charts, in fact, in the chart below. You have an official exchange rate, which still sits at 2,100 Myanmar Chat to the US dollar, which is the rate set by the central bank as a policy. And you have the black curve, which in fact is the black market rate, which you are actually obtaining when you exchange $100. Basically, you would obtain exactly your change in Myanmar chat at this rate, and you have various other rates that are in between. And what is happening is that there's a forced conversion, basically. So the state is providing, for instance, financing for imports at the official rate, while we have, in fact, anyone who needs to change in the direction, I mean, being required to use the black market rate. So we have this differential, and that differential is nothing else but in other economies printing money, and that is the way how the state is financing itself and how the state is also continuing the military operations under the Tamador. So it is a clear relationship how the formal economy and how basically the devaluation of the Myanmar chat is actually financing the conflict. So at the end, every single citizen in the country is in fact somewhat paying in different ways. Might it be through direct taxation, or might it be through the exchange rate for the conflict. So, I mean, the situation. I mean, I've outlined that there are various other issues. I mean, the military service law has driven many young people to leave the country. We have various businesses obviously struggling with the sort of navigating the system with declining demand in certain areas, declining purchasing power, etc. So that's a broad picture on Myanmar's, bleak economy at the moment. But what also in the light of the discussion, I would like to draw the attention to is a bit now how we can deal with the situation. And on the next slide, you can see one classification that I think is really hitting the nail in a certain way, because it looks at exactly how to practically generate peace dividends and at how to understand the this interface of business, peace, and sustainable development better and in very practical terms. So there's a publication which is coming from the World Bank Group by Mary Porter Pacheco, which is looking at the role of the private sector in different phases of a conflict. And I believe we are really seeing all these symptoms in many ways reflected in the case of Myanmar. And need to understand the situation in order to really find ways how to shape peace dividends. So first of all, when we look at the conflict situation, we have a private sector, a formal, long-term oriented, sustainable private sector that is constrained by access to financing issues. For instance, the banking sector in the case of Myanmar has basically broken down in a way as you cannot basically transfer inbound and outbound easily. So Myanmar has been a bit blocked off international financial transactions. We have unpredictability by the private sector, uncertainty, and we have a private sector that really needs to adapt to various of the mentioned and many additional factors that have affected doing business in the country in the last couple of years. I mean, since 2021 in particular, but also before. So we have a normal private sector, a long-term oriented private sector whose hands are tied. But what we have is a focus. We have an adverse selection of private sector enterprises. And this is something we have seen in the border areas very significantly already before. We had the so-called ceasefire capitalism, basically, where ethnic armed actors basically in exchange for peace concessions have been provided economic opportunities effectively in the area of mining in various actors, and were given free hand. So extractive industries have always been dominant in the border areas to take a resource out, to cash it in, and to shut the mine down if it's politically necessary. So this sort of logging, mining, and all this has always been there. And this has now in various ways, this issue has grown very significantly since the COVID time, because we have a new type of extractive industry that has emerged in the border areas of Myanmar, which is this. I mean, you might know it from some sort of African context rather. Scams. So a scamming economy has in fact evolved, which might constitute. I mean, there are different estimates, but I mean, an economy that might make up around conservatively 10%, but possibly more of the formally registered or the formally recorded GDP in the country. So we have in that case over 100 establishments of scam centers that are engaged in any sort of love and romance scams in the Microsoft service team that needs to validate your credit card information or the like, and around 2,000 workers in each of these facilities. So we have something of perhaps half of the size of Winnipeg, in fact, in terms of the total population that is engaged in this scamming industry. In addition to a rise in opium production, I mean, 50% since 2020, as we heard also in the two previous presentations as well, and also other narcotics industries, etc. So that is unfortunately the private sector during conflict. So this is adverse selection of businesses, in fact, that are short-term oriented, partially illegally operating and or criminally operating. The private sector, in terms of this opportunity that we have seen, in terms of what I try to frame with this Rakhine State investment plan and with this investment forum, is which role really the private sector could have for stabilizing a situation in terms of job creation, income generation, service delivery. So all these opportunities, in fact, are available, but what is often missing is this certain, it's a bit like a loan in reliability, in predictability, in a positive expectation, which the private sector does not have to expend, partially adverse policies and not being able to find labor, whatever it might be. So this sort of situation is really one of the key obstacles that really, I mean, we can talk about an improvement of the image of the country. We can talk about really greater confidence of well-educated Myanmar people who are using their excellent skills and technical skills abroad for them to come back. So we need to have this sort of this creation of the right conditions. And we also have another role, which is here on the right hand side in the last column, where really the private sector can have a role in fact improving a situation politically by directly involving in negotiations. We have in Kachin State, for instance, of Myanmar, a business group that has been very instrumental in fact bringing the Kachin Independence Army and the Tamador together to the negotiation table. So we also have business leaders that occasionally take a very, very active role in this. So, with all this, we see, I believe, the status of Myanmar's economy where it stands at the moment, and we see what the prospects would be or what the prospects could be, and the only element, and I think that speaks really to our project, is to identify certain ways and common denominators, how this really shared objective of economic development to many of the stakeholder groups could be realized. So yeah, I hope, I mean, it's a complex topic, but I hope I could give an overview, and I'm very happy to now engage in the discussion.
Thank you, Felix. I think it's a very complex dynamics that at least I understood from your very well researched presentations. And of course, you have portrayed in numbers what are the economic challenges that we are looking at. The audience will start the Q&A session, and we are really happy to find Bonnie Emerson, David Newman, and Dr. Ernest are with us. So, floor is yours. Anyone can go ahead with the question. And after we finish this, if you have time, then we'll take an audience question. Go ahead. Floor is open for Q&A. David.
What I really highlighted in my mind was in that column 3 of that World Bank methodology was the involvement of the business community in mediative processes, in other words, towards solutions. So my question is, what are the relevant private sector business organizations in Myanmar that are potentially part of this? The second thing, to what extent is there a capacity of the legal profession and justice system to effectively bring back some kind of reliable rules to bring back accountability and lawfulness into the business world post conflict? And what is the capacity in the educational institutions for business education and training and involvement from the academic world to be part of the private sector voices for economic solutions?
Yeah. Thank you, David, for all these very concrete questions. On the association landscape in Myanmar and these potential leaders of any peaceful change, or any leaders who could really help with the generation of these peace dividends, I would attach a great role to international chambers of commerce because they comprise enterprises from various sectors, of course, from, for instance, food processing, from consumer goods. Might it be Coca-Cola, might it be Procter and Gamble, might it be any other firm from a regional background or international background. The companies have operated in the country for quite some period of time, and have been organized under the platforms of the different chambers of commerce. Also, since 2012, 13, or throughout the darker days of Myanmar as well. So I would attach great importance to international chambers of commerce. That could be the American Chamber of Commerce, for instance, that has highlighted recently to the Trump-Pence administration, the rare earth deposits in Myanmar and potential engagement opportunities. The international chambers of commerce, I would personally see as, in a certain way, the ambassadors of the realities on the ground, and that is a very important complement to really just diplomatic kind of analysis, embassy cables and the like, which may not capture these realities. So that is very important to have international businesses actually on the ground, not just to operate and to create jobs, but also to provide a feedback to the capitals, basically through these chambers, of what their on the ground situation is, what could be done, and how can mutually beneficial business, in fact, be done between Myanmar and the other country. In Myanmar, all enterprises, national enterprises that are engaged in trade, that are doing any sort of significant business, they are organized under the Union of Myanmar Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, UMFCCI. So that is the central body operating in Myanmar, under which so it's a federation of associations in the different sectors. Might be the Food and Vegetable Association, the Gold and Jewelry Entrepreneurs Association. It's always called Entrepreneurs Association and the like. So this sort of platform is there as a central body. There have been a lot of allegations that UMFCCI would be close to the state side and would be these benefiting from the state business. But there are various examples that in fact provide otherwise. And this UMFCCI has in fact provided a platform, because what happened was that not only embassies but also foreign chambers of commerce were basically, as part of the policy line, not able to engage with Naypyidaw on any sort of policy issues. So there was no contact, no visits, just communication between an embassy and the administration in Naypyidaw on visa issuance and all these sort of things, but no policy advocacy. And so UMFCCI has, in fact, since the crisis, taken a role to really put forward also demands that are not essentially in their own sort of interest as national enterprises, but request from the foreign chambers of commerce to communicate about certain issues facing the overall private sector to the administration. On the justice system, it's a sector that really requires probably the most significant reform. I mean, we have very descriptive laws in a certain way with basically the institutions filling in the gaps of how a certain process around business registration and all would actually, for instance, take place. So we have really, I mean, many laws, I mean, that might not be structured in a way as German law. I mean, some colonial laws, in fact, some updated laws that came in, some laws that were basically reformed based on the advice of the international community during the phase of opening. So there's really significant reform needed. The issue is not the law also. The issue is the reach of law enforcement to conflict-affected areas, and this sort of vacuum of accepting. I mean, if you are even a neighboring country, including China, Thailand, India, you don't want to fundamentally create any instability in the border. You have various actors. You have Naypyidaw, and you have an ethnic armed group that might be operating in a certain area, and you might not want to pivot to create any instability, any sort of fighting. If, for instance, trade is cut and all the like. So the issue is that the status quo has perpetuated amidst this lack of a vision and amidst the lack of reach of state authorities to really clear up undesirable issues such as the scamming industry. On the educational side, also I think we can distinguish, two sides. The national academic institutions, I mean, have of course been underfunded. There are various challenges. I mean, there have been around 200 graduates in agricultural studies, in fact, in Myanmar per batch, in fact, in a country where 60% of the population has been engaged in agriculture. So, you see the skill gap. And it's apparent, we can talk about business skills, we can talk about anything. There might be many geologists, in fact, and zoologists, but I mean, there are too little people with a business degree, and because of the lack of just institutions basically offering the required courses. There are various issues. It's a sector that is under reform and is continuing. I mean, the number of years in high school has been increased, for instance, and all the like. So it's not that nothing is happening even after the coup, but there are various issues that remain. From the international side, it's regrettable that also with the political instability, many ties between Myanmar have, of course, been cut. I mean, you see it for this specific project as well. I mean, if you wanted to work with the Myanmar platform, with the Myanmar university, you would probably receive a red light. So it disconnects people, and it creates two worlds, with people talking about Myanmar, not visiting Myanmar, and realities on the ground that really require a lot of academic research and a lot of new ideas, but that sometimes are a bit disconnected. So that is a long answer, but I hope it fills a bit, gives a broader picture.
Thank you so much. Bonnie, Ernest, if you have any questions for Felix.
Hi, Felix.
Well,
it's great to see you. I know that when we were in Thailand in our peace studies class together, this was a topic of conversation. We were talking when we did our field study by Thailand and Myanmar. We were talking about resource extraction and sort of the role that resource extraction played both in the 2 points that you had mentioned to David's response, which was the international community coming in, and then how the resource extraction, as far as the role international community plays, and how that sort of intersects with justice and law response. Probably way complicated for a short answer, but can you touch on it to see how it's evolved in the last, just 6 years, 5 years, where we're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we have really a development in terms of natural resource extraction that is best described as the resource curse, or there are many different words. I mean, some in the African context, they talk about the diamonds, that create this these sort of issues and all. But we have an economy that in large parts is basically financed by either extractive activities, so large scale mining, some of it legal, some of it in the gray zone, and most of it illegal. And this natural resource extraction is taking place, and it prevents in a certain way the state and all the actors in the country to really address very structural issues of the economy. I mean, I mentioned the import dependency. So you don't have industrial development because you have, with the proceeds from natural resource sale, in fact, you have the resources to just purchase goods. I mean, it might a bit remind of the case of American deindustrialization. But I mean, if you have an unlimited source of, a so-called unlimited source of wealth, in fact, Myanmar didn't need to develop this industrial capacity and could still sustain without any sort of, IMF haircuts and the like. So that's one of the key issues, that not the strategic steps have been taken, which I would note have been taken in many other countries with vast natural resources, in the Middle East, in United Arab Emirates, for instance. There have been all these plans to refocus, repivot to tourism, to become the headquarter of firms operating in the region, to create real estate, to create industry, logistics, and all the like. So this sort of thinking hasn't really commenced. And I'm also not sure, I've tried to introduce it, whenever I could, but it's not something that happens naturally. So we have all this natural resource extraction, and it takes place basically in industries, including, for instance, the jade industry. This is most significant. Jade basically crossing from Pakistan to China, and then being traded on the Kunming market, effectively, so in Yunnan province. So that is a very significant kind of resource, in the also annually. It has slowed down a bit for different political reasons, but it's a very significant industry. For instance, gold mining has significantly expanded, and now the extraction of heavy rare earth, in fact, from Kachin state as well. So in the conflict regions, natural resource extraction takes place. How it looks like practically is that you might have an approval from the government side, in fact, that you do, for instance, natural resource exploration, but in fact you are establishing mines. You might have a certain plot where you are allowed to mine for a certain resource, but you mine for a different one, and you mine in the entire area. And this is the sort of practice how things have emerged here. We don't see too many of the international players involved in the sector. So international companies try to set the standards, of course, in this field, but the vast majority are operated by, some sort of shell company, a local shell company, and then any sort of, international, economic force behind it, that would fund these kind of operations. So there's really, a lot to be improved in that sense.
Okay, well, I'll jump in with something.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's a very good question, Dr. Ernest. Yeah.
So what's the
Ernest, go ahead.
What's the comprehension, for starters, of the average person on the street of what you've been talking about? That's one part of my question, and the other is what is the attitude of the people towards like, have they basically accepted, this is the way things will be, or are they hopeful that things will get better?
Yeah, this is a fascinating question, and I think this is very important we discuss this in this way. Um, we talk about it as a crisis. Even in the webinar title, it mentions crisis for an average Myanmar person. I mean, maybe for IDRC, it is in the framing of two crises, but probably both the Myanmar crisis and also the Rohingya crisis have become a certain status quo. It's the situation that we have now, and this is the way how an average Myanmar person would look at it. Uh, People have experienced, especially since, I mean, there have been different phases. So this is not the first opening of Myanmar, and I mean, just going through the history in it fast forward. I mean, we had from 1962 to 1988, really during the Cold War, really Myanmar freezing, going into isolation. We had then the democratic movement and the opening of Myanmar in the 1990s. So that was not the first opening that we've experienced in the last couple of years, in fact. But in the 1990s, exactly the same things happened, and exactly the same sort of visions. There were also people believing in Myanmar's unique moment at that time. And what happened was military takeover by Senior General Tan Shwe then in 2003, US sanctions that in fact then crippled most of the industry, for instance, the garment sector, and then things with the roadmap to democracy with the 2010 election and then the subsequent by-election in 2012, then somewhat getting back on the path of economic growth and opening. So we have had that, and now we have since 2021, basically, or since the COVID time, so to say, we have again this phase of downturn or of uncertainty, and people consider this a new normal. That's the issue, so people try to live with it. What I would like to highlight is because you talk about the average person, I would describe with many kind of, I have the faces of people in mind, that I know personally and whose stories I know, and can say that really what this opening of Myanmar, the emergence of especially and the re-entry of international private sector, might it be international hotel chains, might it be a distribution related company, might it be a telecommunication company, what these companies have in fact started providing are better working conditions, and they have provided opportunities for a really emerging middle class to stay in the country and to find a place how to work in a decent way, not just as an entrepreneur, not just as someone setting up a family business, trading and the like, but as someone working in an enterprise regularly, as we would know it in Canada, Germany, or the like. And this increasingly, this opportunity is going away now. Many people have been, especially male individuals, of course, at military service age, have been scared by the military service law and its enforcement. So recruitment doesn't just relate to the Tamador side, but it relates in the ethnic areas to militias, to ethnic armed groups. If you are out at nighttime in Michina and you get caught by a militia and you need to serve in this sort of military outfit and with all the risks associated, and that really has driven many people out. So I don't think at this stage there's really any sort of expectation by anyone what could happen, but everyone would like to see something improving, and I believe there's a realization, of course, that the status quo should not continue. That there's just, we are in a prisoner dilemma situation where just life is lost in this continuous conflict, where people get more and more impoverished, and where the country really, in terms of its brand as Myanmar, a made in Myanmar as a tourism fair or anything, where just this brand of the country and the national identity has been hit so hard that really there's there's really a need for change. And I mentioned the inflationary pressures. Everyone is affected by it. It's very hard to make ends meet, and that is of course also something that the general people would face.
Okay, well, thanks. That's a really good answer, and that's all we need, to justify this project that we're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you.
We don't have a lot of time, but there is one question. But Felix, if you very briefly, if you respond to this question as flashed on the screen. So I think the essence of the question is, how do you balance, private sector investment and involvement when there is an overarching situation that you have described in this webinar? Very
Yeah.
briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also very important. Yeah, that's also a very important question, of course. What we can see is, the private sector in Myanmar is largely operating out of the major centers, of course, out of Yangon and out of Mandalay. So these are really the commercial capital, so to say, of the country. And I believe, in the last couple of years, and that also continuing till after the coup, there have been various efforts made to enhance transparency, in fact, in the private sector. So that has been there. It doesn't, it doesn't help effectively eliminate red tape in this sense, but private companies have managed to interact. A lot of things in this country are based on relationship building. Civil servants. A school teacher is paid. I believe. It would be an equivalent of perhaps $40 per month. So it's. That it goes throughout the professions in Myanmar's civil service. So, you have all these issues. I don't need to speak it out now, what we talk about. You see in the question, the wording, but it's creating an enabling environment when you don't have, like in the Singaporean model, civil servants paid a living wage, then you have these sorts of issues. But it's somehow, it's somehow possible to navigate this as a company, and various efforts have been made to really improve this part of the business environment, because that of course also attracts companies to come in. One aspect I should mention, perhaps, that has been counterproductive in this sense is, in fact, for instance, under the Financial Action Task Force, there's been scrutiny, in fact, on basically under the effort of combating money laundering and terrorism financing. Myanmar has been cut off the formal banking sector. So people have resorted to going back to an informal transaction mechanism. I would transfer to COSA, and COSA would give the cash to David, instead of sending. I sent to COSA's auntie in another country, and then that's how we would basically balance, similar to TransferWise or so, how we would balance then trade, and all. A rice exporter would join forces with another company that's importing basically consumer goods and all the like. So this sort of system has been favored, and we were much further ahead with the formalization of the banking sector, transactions and all. But this is an international pressure on Myanmar that, in fact, from my perspective, shouldn't be, and that is just hitting business and regular individuals that want to do regular business in a compliant way. Yeah, so that's in very brief, the private sector answer to these red tape issues.
Thank you so much, Felix. Sorry, I think your comprehensive assessment of economic political situation on ground is really well suited to justify our project, what we are looking at, economic development for conflict resolution. The audience, we are going to wrap up the event tonight with a couple of thoughts I think is important for all of us to understand, that we are talking about peace in Myanmar. Is not utopia that we are professing. Actually, it's grounded on reality. You have heard Felix, and if we may say that this is the voice from the ground, which is you can find it in the news channels, but this is something important what Felix has described today, what is actually happening and what is the status quo situation that possibly is no more tenable here. So and the second thought is that our project aims to build a consensus among stakeholders that peace is needed and conflict is not going to bring any development and peace in this area forever. And this is the fundamental precept based on which we all are working on together. And thirdly, I would say that both Felix and Bonnie Emerson, Rotary Peace Fellows, they have spent considerable time in that region at some point. So both are really, have on ground, understanding of the situation. This is why Bonnie's question is very important and insightful. So, having said that, dear audience, please join us in our subsequent webinars. We are continuously trying to strive forward with webinars, bringing scholars and activists together in this platform and record their discussions and presentations. And you will find all these things in our Knowledge Hub. Please tune in www.cric.org and then project, and you will find our Knowledge Hub, which is the repertoire of knowledge of all these activities that we are doing. With this, I would like to thank Felix Haas for being with us for over 1 hour, and also most importantly sharing his thoughts. He's a private consultant and also a consultant with us in this project. We heavily rely on his insight from the ground because it is really, really difficult to access any sources, whether it is Rotarians or academics or civil society in Myanmar. We have tried in the past numerous times. We have not been successful. And even, let me be very frank today, that we are also unable to remain in touch with any Myanmar diaspora group here in Canada or US. So on that note, we thank you once again for being with us. Stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.